Well, friends, the burning question of the day is, am we getting stupider? I know what you're thinking. Getting stupider? That's impossible. But let's bring in our leading trifecta intellectuals to discuss this disturbing possibility. Boys, Professor Gerald Crabtree of Stanford University says that human intelligence likely peaked thousands of years ago, and that intellectual de-evolution is a foregone conclusion, whatever that means. He says that hunter-gatherers had to think on their feet while stalking their lunch because if they didn't, they became something else's dinner. But now that we have the local Quickie Mart, ain't nobody don't know how to do nothing. Scotty, do you think this guy's got a point? It sounds like it has the ring of truth to me.
Absolutely, and this fits right into my theory of the survival of the slacker. I mean, clearly Darwin was wrong. You don't need to be the fittest in order to survive. You don't have to be the smartest. You just have to be sort of the, the second slowest gazelle in the herd. And I think we're proving that intellectually. You can go through an entire public education system when your main goal is just to stay within the certain points on the curve. You're not really there to excel. Anytime my children have told me that, it was like I'm doing very well in that class, and I said, you understand, of course, that that class is targeted to the slowest moving vessel in the fleet. So doing really well in a public school class is not a sign of distinction. Yeah, I think it's quite possible. And on the final note here, Sunday morning while I was teaching Sunday school, I pointed out to my class, I said, if you believe that we're getting smarter and smarter as the generations go on, just go back and read some stuff that a theologian and pastor, John Calvin, wrote, and that will bring you to a state of humility.
You bet. So your theory is basically can be summed up by the fact that there's two guys out in the woods running from a bear, and one guy says to the other, man, we're never going to be able to outrun that bear. And the other guy says, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you. Steve, Professor Crabtree goes on to say something else that I thought had the ring of truth to it. Quote, I would wager that if an average citizen from Athens of 1000 BC were to appear suddenly among us, he or she would be among the brightest and most intellectually alive of our colleagues and companions, with a good memory, a broad range of ideas, and a clear-sighted view of important issues. I think that's absolutely right. That's why I found this story so interesting. You would think that an ancient Athenian would be more intellectually isolated than a modern Californian professor of literature, but I'll bet Crabtree is right. Not that the faculty lounge is a terribly high bar to clear, mind you. Right, Steve?
I like to hear the sound of two bricks being smashed together.
No, sorry. I made Bill snort. I love doing that. That's just it, though. The faculty lounge. It's credentials versus education. We're credentialing like mad, but I don't think we're educating very well anymore. You know what? If you plop that average Athenian, if you plopped him down in Johnny Ive's double secret probation prototype shop at Apple's headquarters, he'd be amazed. Or let him sit in on a meeting, the guys who do Google's algorithms. You can just set them loose at an IDF battalion-level staff meeting now today as they're gearing up to go to war. And I think he'd find it all fascinating and well worth the gift that Athens bequeathed to Western civilization all those centuries ago. But I know I'm running along here. But you know what? If you put him in that faculty lounge for half an hour and you sent him back to Athens after that, he would probably tell his countrymen just to let the Persians win.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I have seen the future, and the future is duh. Now, Scott, Professor Crabtree goes on to say that not only has our intellectual fortitude likely diminished, our emotional toughness and flexibility is also shot, which is frankly, I think, a pretty mean thing to say. And I think this Crabtree guy is just a jealous butthead. And what does he know anyway? And excuse me for a second, because I have to cry.
Well, when you think about it, my family and the average family in America gets kind of weepy and cranky if they have to take a car trip that goes anything over about an hour and a half. My ancestors had to travel through woods on no roads with wolves and mountain lions and no food at times, and having to decide which one of the children were going to eat at other times. And these were tough people. And I often think, what's going to happen if the grid goes down for an extended period of time? We've seen it in New York City in many ways. A lot of people jumped in and helped, but there were a lot of people who, for a period of time, were just utterly helpless without the sustenance of the grid and the superstructure of government to keep them alive.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Steve, all kidding aside, well, okay, most of the kidding aside, proto-hunters had to be smart and kill leopards and mammoths and invent beer and sharp sticks and fire, so they evolved into conservatives. Once cities arose, people could just stand there and have other people grow food for them and also clothe and bathe and entertainment, and these people are the ancestors of modern liberals. Now, this tells me that not all people are dumber than their ancestors, just, certain kinds of people. We won't name names here, but let's just say the kind of people whose political party ends in Democrat. Now, since the science is settled, why do you think these liberals resist such an obvious conclusion?
You know what? I got a problem with the whole premise here. Since when does it take that much brain power to scavenge for food? How did that get to be this guy's standard? Mostly early humans lived on berries or whatever they could pick up off the ground because hunting animals is hard and it can be dangerous. Meat was hard to come by. It was a treat. It was a special thing when you managed to get it. So if we're so stupid, seriously here, if we're so stupid, how is it we can drive a vehicle that goes 100 miles an hour and it's computerized to this Quickie Mart, which acts as a commercial hub for an international logistics chain of unimaginable complexity and hand slips of counterfeit-proof paper to buy as much sterilized, safe-to-eat, safe-to-buy beef as we want? Who's the dummy, you half-starved berry picker?
Alrighty then. Well, folks, there are two reasons that I chose this story this week. First of all, I happen to think that Professor Crabtree is correct, and anyone who's ever read the 7th grade final exam test for the state of Kansas in 1903 knows that there aren't 5 adults in 1,000 today that could ace that test that 7th graders passed routinely 11 decades ago. Secondly, it points out to me the difference between intelligence, which is the ability to arrive on a strange and confusing scene, observe, gather data, analyze the data, come up with a plan, execute the plan, and then be prepared to improvise when the plan goes awry, as plans almost always do, and to do all of that in real time, often with fatal consequences for error. That's genuine intelligence. What passes for intelligence these days is the kind of intelligence that liberal professors like to brag about as they sit in hot tubs sipping a reasonably priced Merlot and talking about 14th century Italian Renaissance poets. That's not intelligence. It's only a narrowly defined expertise. And the difference between intelligence and expertise doesn't matter much in a faculty lounge or a hot tub, but it does matter on the modern battlefield, where the truly intelligent protect the pretend intelligent from themselves. For PJTV, I'm Bill Whittle.